Hey up everybody and welcome back. Right, well, B50 project is out of the way. I've got to get that sorted out and sell it for no other reason than to make some space. So we have a couple of things to finish off. We've got some work on this to get it done, get it out and get it ridden. And actually, every time, I still haven't got the C15 registered ready for sale, but every time I walk past it, that seat height annoys me. Partly the seat height and partly the big gap between the oil tank on one side, the toolbox on the other side, and the bottom of the saddle. So we're going to lower that about 1.25 inches. First of all, we'll do this. So what I'm going to do to start with, as you can see, I've got the barrels on. Got something to tell you about that. We're going to do a little bit of work with the drill on the head, which I'll explain. We've got some bolts to make for this. But before we do that, I'm going to just show you a couple of things I did. Because as I say, I've decided to keep this. To be honest, I didn't really see there being anybody here in the US who'd want to buy it. And you know, I don't want to sell it just for the sake of selling it and having to go to somebody who, I don't know, isn't going to treat it for what it is. So I thought, well, I've sold my Bs at 250. I could ride a couple of vintage trials. So I'll ride them on this, and also I can ride around here on my sections on this. Alright, so let's show you a couple of things I've done on this since we finished off the series and you last saw it sort of in total. Right, well, so the first thing I wanted was a better kickstart. You remember I mentioned that, and I was trying to get one of the little alloy ones, and Terry Weedy in the UK advertised them, but God, you can never get in hold of him, and every time I go to his website they're sort of still pending. So I thought, can't wait forever for that. So to my good old friend Mike's and said, what have you got in the way of kickstarts? So he had all sorts of things, and part of the problem here with the Triumph is the kickstart lever and the gear change lever are so close together, there's not much space. So really I probably couldn't have used anything like that. So what I did was I picked up one of these type that go on there and swivel like that. But of course, Triumph spline is, I guess it's an imperial size spline. So what I did was, I took my Triumph kickstart, and don't start shouting, you can still buy these, and I cut off the splined part, right? And then the knuckle that was in here, I cut the spline off the bottom of the knuckle, and then welded the Triumph spline piece onto the knuckle for this one. So now we've got that, right? And that was fine, tucks out nicely, looks good, everything is excellent, except for one thing, of course. You've still got, hang on, yeah, you've got to fold this up out of the way to give clearance for that to swing down. Right, there just isn't quite enough clearance for that. Now I could have bought one of those, which I think, to be honest, look horrible. Those type that have that great big thing, I mean, don't like them at all. And I've never found having to pop that up out of the way while I kickstart it to be a particular imposition. Right, so that was that. But then the other thing was, because of where this pivots, you see, there's not much space to put a brake pedal there. See, it would have to be about this long. So I thought, you know, if I'm going to keep this, I don't mind having the brake pedal on the left. I can swap over from right to left depending on which bike I'm riding. So I plugged up these little holes, and luckily, as you'll see, I was able to virtually just move everything over the other side and make it cable operated. It was the beauty of it being cable operated. So let's go and have a look at the other side. So I was able to move over the mounting plate from the other side, just drilled and tapped this, which you remember is 1/4 inch, so that's nice. Actually all I did was turned it upside down and it fitted perfectly. The brake pedal, you may remember, I hadn't welded the end on anyway because I wasn't sure. So that didn't take much in the way of modifying to get me a brake lever. Alright. The only thing was the cable routing was a little difficult. I maybe could have done it more like that. But that's, I've put a spring on to keep it off the exhaust. That's got to be sort of finalised. But one thing was, and also you remember I made these plates so that I could fit the brake pedal on either side. Suddenly struck me when I put this on, I didn't think I was going to be able to get the chain tensioner on there, the spring anyway. So I was thinking about how am I going to, hang on. How am I going to put a spring on here? And then just out of interest, I tried it and there is just enough space for everything to fit there. So that was the brake pedal moved over and the kickstart dealt with. So that was fine. I'm now ready to go on that. So the next thing was to put the alloy barrels on. Right, so I put the barrels on. We got the bit of machining work done to put the cam followers in, or the cam follower block in. And to be honest, I'm not over impressed with these barrels. So go to put them on. First of all, the holes are tight. I mean, it was a tight fit to get on. And by then I'd already put the, got the pistons in and all the rest of it. So they're going to take a bit of bumping to get off. Anyway, so I got them on. I started to put the bolts, the nuts on. And as you know, these two nuts under here are difficult to get at. I do have, hang on a second. I'll put this in the drive box. I'm still here, I'm still here. I can't find it. Anyway, I made a spanner, I bent the spanner at right angles to fit into those. These two, this one and the one on the other side, you cannot get a ring spanner on it because of the casting. And of course it's a 12 point, you can't put an open-ended spanner on. So I had to grind away with a ring spanner. I could just to say get it on to tighten them down. So I wasn't that happy with that. So then I put the push rod tubes in. The exhaust one went on. When I go to put this one on, it wouldn't fit in. It wouldn't fit in because the cutaway in the fins wasn't big enough to get it in. And of course by then I'd bolted this down and I thought, this is really getting to be annoying. So what I did in the end was the new hacksaw, which I broke in two. I literally just used the edge as a file and went round and eased all the fins until I could finally get that to fit. So, as I say, they were, how much were the barrels and the tappet block? And of course the tappet blocks when they came had been oversized, which is what we needed to do the machining for and whatever. So all in all, for spending $800, I wasn't, what's that, in fact at the present rate, God, if I had to buy them now, the pound's what, 1.2? So we're probably talking about, what, £680, something like that. I would have expected them to just fit. Now the other thing, which is probably something I should have thought about, is, I think I mentioned this, the Triumph barrels are cast iron, so they can be drilled and tapped with a fine thread. Look, there's a big lorry. Some of them hardly make a hill out here, others just zoom up it. And I mean lorries with the same loads, the salt lorries. Anyway, but being alloy, these are being tapped with a coarse thread, which is fair enough. It gives it a much stronger thing to go in, because you're actually holding the head down on these. The bolts don't go all the way through. But of course they've just done them 10mm threads, 10 by 1.5. So when I come to put the head on, because the original bolts wouldn't fit. So now I needed to make some 10mm bolts, because the bolts aren't ordinary. But the next thing it suddenly realised was 10mm is a bit bigger than 8mm, so 10mm bolts won't go through those holes. So they're all going to have to be drilled out, and these 4 here, they're going to have to be drilled out in the rocker boxes as well. So there's another job we've got to do. So bolts, let's go and look at bolts. So here are the 8-cylinder head bolts. These are the 4 that go around the outside, if you like, and these are the 4 that go through the rocker box. 2 of them, so you have a piece of the flats there that are part of the bolt. That's where the head steady goes on. So I thought to myself, what am I going to do here? So I bought some 3/8 hex, because I thought to myself, if I put 10mm bolts in with 10mm heads, then every single bolt on the bike except the 8-cylinder head bolts are going to be Imperial, either UNC, UNF, or there's, on the engine there's still a couple of British threads, and these 8 bolts are going to be metric. So I didn't want to do that. So I thought I'd get some 9/16 hex spar, which I'll turn down to make 10mm bolts instead of 3/8 bolts. But I'm thinking, God, that's a lot of work. I mean, it's going to be really difficult to get these done. You know, put them in the lathe. And then I thought, wait a minute, I know what I'll do. So I bought, let's move a couple of these out of the way, 10mm bolt. As it turned out, look, the threaded portions very similar. So what I'm going to do, make sure you're still in picture, yep, is I'm going to cut the head off that, and I'm just going to make, I'm going to cut a piece of hex that length, drill it and put it on, and then weld it on. That's those 4 bolts made really easily. Then basically we're going to do the same thing with these. Got some longer 10mm bolts. Now, as I mentioned, I don't want to have metric bolt heads on the bike. It'll just be a nightmare for keeping your spanners right. So we'll cut this the appropriate length and put some short pieces of hex on there to make bolt heads. Then this one, see, I've got these long enough. We're going to cut the head off. We're going to turn this down and thread it 3/8. 3/8 fine, which is what these are. Couple of 3/8. Actually, I don't have to, I'm just thinking, I can use nuts on there, couldn't I? Welded on, yes. Couple of 3/8. Well, what are they? 3/8. The 9/16 nuts. Screw them down. Little bit of weld so they won't unscrew, and then I've got those bolts made really easily. I'm going to do these with the big piece. I think that's there. Yeah, they dip down into the head a little bit, so we'll replicate those properly. Actually, looking at these nuts, I think they're 3/8 BSC. So again, same thing. I can make these UNF. Just the finish on the nut, I'm almost sure that's my BSF nuts. See, they're really nice. They're flat on one side and they're domed on the other. Waffling. So I can actually make these so that they're spot on with all the rest of the fasteners on them, on the bike. So let's get stuck in. We'll do some measurements. As I say, I'm very close that end. I'm going to check the depth of threads on the cast iron barrels, and then check the depths on these alloy barrels to make sure I'm okay there. And then we'll start lopping the ends off, get the hex bar out, cut it into some pieces the right length, drill them 3/8 and go from there. Just to forestall comments, I know these are shiny, so they might look like the cheapy bolts, but they're not. They're the higher grade steel for the bolts. Okay? Alright people, we are living in a fast-paced world where things change from 1 minute to the next. Alright, so that is a 3/8 bolt. In fact, I've measured it, it's only 370. It's not even 375. But this is a 5/8 bolt head, and of course I've bought 9/16 hex. I don't know if that 1/32 on each side is going to make much difference, but I mentioned how to drill holes. That's because when I tried these bolts, they wouldn't go through, right? But isn't that just my luck? The one hole I tried it in, no, oh, it must have been that one. See, it doesn't want to go through. So there are 3 holes out of the 8 that it won't go through. I just checked the rockers, the rocker boxes. One rocker box 10mm will go through, one rocker box they won't. So I've only got a little bit of drilling in a couple of holes. Just run a drill through, it'll guide itself. I've got a 10mm drill, so that'll be done. Do I order some more hex rod? I mean 9/16 to 10/16. Oh well. Anyway, I'm going to drill these holes out first. Right, well, maybe foolish of me, but I'm going to assume that the Triumph engineers had a logical reason, or a sound engineering reason, for using 5/8 for the heads on these. So I bought some 5/8. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to measure that, which is 5/8, and I'm going to put this, mark this off, put it in the horizontal bandsaw and just lop off 4 lengths. So there's the 4 of them, cut roughly to length. Well, actually 3 cut roughly to length. This one I've already faced off to be exactly 5/8. So I'll face the other 3 and then we'll drill some holes through them. So there's the 4 of them faced off to length, drilled 3/8. And you see I've put a big chamfer in. That's sort of weld prep. When we do the head of the bolt, we'll chamfer the end of the bolt and then we can fill that in and make it a really nice weld, and then we'll face it off. So next thing I've got to do is cut these off exactly the same length as that. Then I'm going to put them in and take this bit down to 3/8, so it's a really good tight fit with that, and then we'll weld them on. Now I only had to take about 1/6 thou off this. Chamfered the end, so that's going to match up with that, so that goes on there. And then we'll weld into there, and we'll have a new bolt, the right length, the right head, but 10mm thread. Okay, so let me do the other 3. So there we go. One original, as I say, I think BSF, and 4 replica metric ones. Let's go and see if they fit. Right, well, so nicely new annealed head gaskets in there and O-rings and all the rest of it. Here's something interesting. You know how for the BSAs I normally have to make up the thicker, the 1/8 inch thick head washers because I can never find them. My supplier doesn't list them. Well, I looked to get some 10mm washers and it said thick washers, and they do 1/8 inch for the metric. Well, 3mm. So when we've got them all in, these go to 18 foot-pounds. 2 went in. And that one's going in with my fingers, so that's going in all right. I did check that they would go through all the holes in the head gasket. Now I'm only going to just want to make sure they'll go all the way down without binding on anything. But I will do it diagonally just to be, as I said, for those of you who worry about these things, I'm only just taking these down till they're, not even till they're snug, just till I feel that they're all the way down. Well, they're obviously going into those threads fine. Not binding, as I say, so all the holes are lining up. Wouldn't know the difference, would you? Very good. All right, lunchtime. So now we'll make the 4 long ones. We're going to make the 2, these 2 first. So all I'm going to do is put that there so that they're level at the bottom. I'm going to make the top just slightly bigger, slightly taller. Just makes it easier to make it. So there's one. And there's the other one. I'll actually mark the bottom as well, I suppose. Right, so I'll cut it off there. Well, what I'm going to do this time is put the hex rod in and drill it, and then use the parting off tool to cut the sizes I need. Alright. Right, so original 2 replica ones. So now we're going to do these 2. Now as you can see with these, that actually is not very big, and that's to fit it in there and get the engine steady on. So we've got, as with here, we've got a piece coming up to the head, then we've got the equivalent of the head, then there's a little bit that isn't threaded, then there's a bit that's threaded 3/8. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut our new bolt. See, it's just nicely long enough. Just cut it under the head there. We're going to turn it down to the 3/8. Going to cut ourselves this piece of hex bar, again using the cut off tool so I can get the exact right size I want it. Then, because I've got a nice bit here which doesn't have any thread on, we will turn this down, as I say, 1/6 hour, whatever it is, to get it to the 3/8 size. Knock this on nice and tight. Tack weld it. I think just a few tacks going around should do for this actually. Then we'll run the die down here to do the 3/8 UNF thread, and then those two are finished. And there are the last two. Original, two new ones. And they've taken me a lot longer than I thought they would, so that's going to be it for today. So I won't waste time showing you me putting the rocker boxes back on, because you all saw that when we had the episode where I built the engine. So I bought, just to be on the safe side, I bought new rocker box gaskets. So we'll put them on, put the push rods in, and then, as I had just been thinking in terms of BSA, when I put these rocker boxes on, which are interchangeable, I'd put the dome nut to that side, as I say, a la BSA. But I was pointed out to me that I'd done it wrong, so we're going to do them the right side. So let me just put the exhaust rocker box on, and then when we put the inlet one on, I think I'm going to have to slightly modify the flats, because there's not a lot of space to get the bolts in here, but you'll see that later on. Right, I got the exhaust rocker box on, but even that, you know, it would have been such a chew on. I've taken the engine mounting bolts out and just dropped the engine. The only way to get them in. I mean, with the engine up on the bench, you could build it fine, but you know, every little job you don't want to have to take the engine out. And I hate the fact you can't see. Well, I'm just venting about Triumphs. I just don't like them. Putting the push rods on is no fun. Alright, let me get this rocker box on. Right, so there it is. The top end on, the engine lifted back up and put in. I think these bolts look great. So, I was going to put the new carb I bought for it, but I stole the throttle slide out of it to try in the Enfield, because it was a number 4, and I had, I think, 3.5 in there, and I thought it needed to be a bit weaker. So I've got to take that off there, and that's a bugger because I've got to take the carburetor off. Well, I have here as well, I can't get the top off. So I'll do that tomorrow, and then we'll put the tank on and get her running and take her out for a gallop, hopefully. Alright, see you tomorrow. So there it is, all back together. I still have to put the fuel lines on, and I've welded a little tab onto the back of the tank for the rubber strap to go over. Hang on. The little rubber strap will go over here. Actually, it's not quite as good as I wanted, because I didn't have as much space in the back here as I thought I had. But I can nicely get at it, put a strap on there which will just go around to there. And that'll hold it down because it's on tight at the front. It's on rubber buffers. So that's it, fuel lines, and then we can see if this one will start, which it did before. Okay, so actually I have to go and get some petrol as well. So let me go and get these couple of things sorted, and then we'll see about starting it up. Right, well, problems. Alright, the reason I've got you seeing the bikes like this is because I want to show you what the problem is. It's nothing major, but as with a lot of them, it's annoying. Got everything finished on this, started it up, ran like crap. Now, I bought a brand new carb for it. I've noticed that I think all of the concentric premiers I've bought have a number 2 pilot jet in them, and every one of them I've had to change. They're too small. I mean, I know modern carburation is designed to run very weak and all the rest of it, but these aren't modern engines. So the Enfield, when I had this running, it didn't want to start with the other one, but I put a number 3 jet in this, and it had a number 4 throttle slide in it. Well, the parts book says a 3.5, and as I say, this was running really badly. So I put a number 3 pilot jet in, and I put a 3.5 throttle slide in, and it's really nice. It just ticks over. It's definitely running on 2 cylinders, which you remember with the old carb it wasn't. It picks up nicely. That was fine. So I've got a nasty feeling, actually, you can't see my head here, but never mind. But what I want to show you is this. These 3 bikes here all have side pull throttles on. 2 of them are AMO. One's a what's it? A Domino one. They all have concentric premieres, so they've all got the same springs and everything like that. Now, this obviously is going to be difficult to show, but look, I'm just putting a couple of fingers on. Right? Now, admittedly, this doesn't have the grip on, but I have to get hold of that. It closes, but I've got to get a grip of it. Even with the ribs on to help. So, that obviously, I took it out for a little ride, and that was terrible because, you know, I sort of, nothing would happen, and then suddenly it would open, and this thing really picks up quickly, as you will see. So, my first thought was, it was that cable routing. You remember it goes through the little thing on the frame? So I've actually got the cable outside now. The carb's just hanging down almost, just loose, so there's no... That wasn't it. So then I thought maybe it was too strong a spring. So I changed the spring. That wasn't it. Then I changed the twist grip. That wasn't it. So it's got to be something that's really dragging in the long section of the cable, because when I had this disconnected, this little bit I could just, it was really smooth. So I'm going to take it off. I'm going to find an old cable to just connect up and see if that solves the problem, and if it does, we'll make a new cable. Okay. Right, well, I found a nice cable, but it wasn't long enough. I couldn't get it into the twist grip and everything. But look at this. I mean, that's just silky smooth. Oh, I'm back to being baffled. Let me investigate more. Right, I've made up a completely new cable, and I've noticed in the past some slight anomalies in sizes. So I used all fittings from Barnett's, so everything should be right. The carb isn't even on the engine. I've just got a couple of very gentle curves in it to go down there. I can't turn it. I mean, I can turn it like that, but you see, it doesn't even slam shut. Man, this is so annoying. Everything is finished, but this throttle's virtually making it unrideable. Damn it! Let me keep going. Alright, now, being trained in the scientific method and the use of logic, I've looked at this in great detail and decided it's magic. I mean, I can only see sort of 3 mechanical pieces to this. There's the twist grip turning, there's the cable sliding in and out, and there's the slide going up and down the carburetor. I've tried different twist grips. I even got out a different carburetor. So I've made another brand new cable. I've used the flexible inner wire, I've used new outers, I've used all Barnett fittings, and it is now smooth, and it shuts immediately, which it wasn't doing before, but it's not as stiff, but I still can't, I can just do it with my fingers. So I really am perplexed. I had two thoughts. One, the B50 has the road bike grips and they are thicker. I'm wondering if that in itself, the much larger circumference, is helping with mechanical advantage. And on the Enfield, which has these trials grips on, I've got a domino throttle. So again, perhaps the mechanical advantage is different. You remember, well, you might not remember, I changed the one on the domino to be a bit slower because the Enfield was picking up too quickly for me. So I might try this with a domino throttle, which of course I haven't got, so I have to get one. But as I say, that is worlds better. Okay, so let me put the tank on and we'll see if it, well, you'll hear it start with the changes to the jetting. Right, so we're all connected up again. Fuel on. Get a little tickle. Let's see what's going to happen. That seems reasonable. Okay, the sun's shining now, but we're due a thunderstorm any minute and I've got to move stuff around. So definitely, before we finish this video, I'll get Linda to film me at least having a trundle round outside, up that little climb and round the trees. Okay, so until then, just do something else. Right now, I know I said we were done, but hasn't started to rain yet. In fact, it's still sunny, but it looks really nasty over the valley. So I took it out for a quick gallop round. That little piece I have just next to the workshop here with the climb and the trees and everything works really well. If you're worried about all that smoke when we first started it up, don't forget I over-oiled it for putting the barrels on and all that type of thing. So it's cleared up now. There's a little wisp of black smoke, so I'm maybe still running slightly rich, but other than that, it runs nicely. It's quite nimble, goes around the trees alright, does the climb beautifully. I mean, first time I was a bit, you know, not quite sure. I'm still terrified, of course, if I drop it, I'll damage this. But after a couple of 3 goes, it just goes up beautifully. So, still a little bit of a handful. Although actually the throttle is working fine. I guess it's just, I don't know, different bikes, whatever. But it was, when I took it out before, it was a case of I was having to pull and then suddenly it would open. And with this, it just jumped forward a bit. I can see why they like the 350s and the 400s. But don't forget, this is a T100R engine. We've got the low comp pistons in it out of Kawasaki, we've got the single carb on. I've retarded the ignition just a few degrees, but it's still got sort of the sports camshafts in it, like the T100T at home, the Daytona, which used to be the bike for the 500 class of what was the word, production racing when I was younger. So because I'm keeping it, later on we may do a little bit of experimentation. I'll see if I can find a couple of more, I don't know, early T100 type cooking camshafts. The chap I know in Canada who has the 500, I was just rereading the stuff that he'd sent to Charlie Prescott, Charlie put on the Otter one, and he mentioned that he had 3134 cams in, and I think it was the inlet cam he said he'd offset it a tooth, so he's changed the valve timing a little bit. But his is a 500 and he manages on that nicely. I've seen him riding that. So anyway, all we're going to do now is wait to get Linda out to man the camera, and then I'll show you me riding it. But I think we've been successful with that. Alright, so I'll see you later. Right, we'll finish off with an update on the Henderson, because there it is. Everything sorted, ready to go to the Henderson expert. I'm sure some of this stuff he'll throw away, but I just wanted to take everything that I'd got. So it's all boxed, all bagged, boxed up, and we're going to take it down there tomorrow, which is Friday. And then actually the chap Mark Hill, I think his name is keen on the idea of being part of the project altogether, because obviously he builds these top class bikes, and the bikes that'll ride all the way from the east coast to the west coast with a cannonball run. But as you know, this engine's going into a 1930s race car, which was built with a Henderson engine in it, but the engine had gone. So Jim, who owns the car, managed to find this one. Actually, as I was boxing and bagging stuff up, there's things like the new pistons there and all that sort of stuff, the rebabbited conrods and what have you, that's there. But I hadn't taken a great deal of notice of some of the stuff. Now you may remember that, well, you can see how bad this was. It had been standing, we were sure, with water in the bottom of the engine, because, I don't know if you remember, the camshaft, of the 8 lobes on it, 7 of them were just so incredibly pitted, you wouldn't believe it. They were just, you know, it had to be remade. But I also found, as I was gathering stuff together and putting it in bags for Mark, because it was all in little boxes, that a few pinions, again, were really deeply pitted. But I know Mark, as I say, builds these engines that the racers used to go from one course to the other. So the engines he builds lasts for thousands of miles of continuous running. So I'm sure he has everything necessary to put this together to run well in Jim's race car. So anyway, when it's done, I'll take the camera with me and see if we can talk to Mark and maybe look at his workshop. But when this is all done, we'll show you the car. Alright, so that's it for this week. Till I see you next week, stay safe and enjoy yourselves.